grab your popcorn and snacks, find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Hey, welcome to the show. Afternoon show for me. Hopefully our guest signs in from the UK today. My name is Charlotte. I should be one way or another, I'll be your host for an hour. I'm from Sacramento, California, and also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team based out of Sacramento. However, we work up and down the state of California, Washington, Oregon, and Washington. In the state of California, we're 35 strong, and we work as a nonprofit team to help people when they think they have paranormal stuff going on in their homes. You can visit our website at www.californiahaunts.org. And if you're interested in seeing more of our radio shows, the best way to do that would be to visit the radio show website at www.californiahauntsradio.com. Today's guest, Charles Christian, is a author from the UK. Hang on one second. Okay, allergies. Is an author from the UK, and he has some interesting stories to tell. He studies British folklore, UK folklore in general, Scotland, all over the UK. And one of the topics we're supposed to talk about today is the fact that one of the UK papers had asked him to go on a werewolf hunt to look for werewolves. And he did, and he has the results of that. So we're excited to talk with him about that. Tomorrow's guest, we're going to go ahead and tease that ahead of time, is D.P. Greycastle, and he has done some research on numbers and colors and how they correspond with your name and kind of control your destiny. So he's going to be on tomorrow. So while we wait for Mr. Christian, he might be behind schedule today. You never know. Let's talk about stuff. Halloween's coming up, and everybody's starting to get spooked out. I don't know what happens around the world on All Hallows Eve, but I know what happens here in the United States. And it seems like there's a big rush for ghost hunting this time of year because I guess people are more into it. And I know there's a lot of ghost hunters that kind of get in dismay this time of year because usually the only time the media wants to cover any kind of ghost hunting is this time of year. They don't want to do it mid-year. But you'll start seeing different news shows with news crews going out with ghost teams and whatnot. And you also see a rise as a ghost team. You also see a rise in cases. And we're no different. We've got a case coming up this week that we're going to be going out on, a local case. And I think one of the plans for us, too, is we're going to try and do a live ghost hunt here on California Haunts Radio for you guys. And try and do a video and podcast ghost hunt. And we're trying to put that together right now. So you guys will be able to see that and see what we do and hear what we do. We'll try and keep our language clean. Anyway, so since Charles isn't here, I thought we'd just chat about ghost hunting in general in different places. And I know a lot of you don't live in this area, but yeah, you might have forgotten the last time. Sometimes the times get confused between the UK and here, and there's not much I can do about it. We just got to wait. But anyway, I thought I'd talk about some of the haunted places here, some of the accessible places that people can go. Here we go. Charles is trying to get in. All right, there's my buddy. So Charles is here. We're going to have that talk later on in the month about accessible haunted places here in this area in the United States. And I'm glad that Charles is here. We'll let him get set and prepared, and we're going to talk about some really cool stuff because the last time Charles was on, we talked about everything under the sun. King Arthur, the legend of King Arthur. We talked about fairy folk and all kinds of stuff. And Charles knows all about that stuff. So let's do this.
Ed.
Hello.
Hi there. How you doing?
Good. How are you today?
Fine. I say just getting used to. Obviously, we're 8 hours time difference. Just getting used to the winter coming in and the dark nights starting and the days catching me out. And,
it seems weird for us because around Halloween time here, we always turn the clock. You know, we do that clock thing.
Yeah,
But it seems like now it's strange because we're going into September, and it's getting dark at 7 p.m.
yeah.
So it kind of throws us off because I don't think a lot of people here are used to that.
Yeah, no, it's strange. It seems to have been getting a bit darker earlier this year compared with last year. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, it's really strange, really, really strange. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine. Say it's part of it is getting myself remembering that I've got shorter days and not trying to go off and do something and suddenly discovering, no, I can't do that because it's dark.
Yeah, it's happening to me because usually after I do my show, I would go out and meditate in the yard.
Yeah.
And normally, I do my show from 6:30 to 7:30 in the evening. And so by the
Mhm.
time I go out, it's pitch black. And depending, because the days are shorter, because all my lights run on solar.
Yeah.
So
Right.
the stuff that's pointing to the west isn't getting as much juice as it usually is. So by the time I get out there at 8 o'clock, it's almost out.
Yeah.
So I have no light.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a strange thing. And the other point um, that's always thing to bear in mind, particularly when I'm talking to anybody in the United States, is your shift to daylight saving time is a week after our shift. So
Hmm.
we have this strange period where, if you're not careful, you end up missing each other for an hour when you're making
Right.
calls and things.
Plus, this year it's a week. This year it's like a week later for us.
Uh,
Because usually we
yeah,
shift right around October 31st. Halloween is usually that first week is when it's pitch black outside. By seven
yeah.
o'clock. But this time they're not doing it till November.
No idea. I think we
Yeah,
are. I think we go Halloween about
yeah. See,
whenever
you're going to be a
the
week ahead
30,
of us.
the
See,
31st is, or
yeah,
the
you'll be
first.
a week ahead of us, and then we're going to do it like November 8th this time instead of in
Yeah,
front of
we
Halloween.
always
So
do it on a Saturday night to Sunday night.
yeah,
I mean, a Saturday night to Sunday morning.
yeah.
Um, Presumably on the basis that uh, nobody's going to work on a Sunday, so it's not so bad if you're asleep. But
That's
not
right.
really,
They're
not
going to
really
work
the
at the
case. Not really the case in the 21st century.
wrong time. So the last time you were on, we talked about a lot of stuff. But
Yeah,
what was interesting and what we didn't talk about was you went hunting for werewolves.
I did indeed. I did indeed. Yeah.
So tell me
Um,
about that.
right. Well, I wrote a book about the folklore of a part of the north of England, and it's interesting because werewolves aren't part of the normal folklore of England. Um, there's one or two werewolf tales from Scotland, and there's masses of them in continental Europe and further afield, and obviously in North America with the Native American traditions and things.
Hmm.
But they're very, very rare actually in England in sort of historical times. And there's only one I know of, and it happened to be lurking at a place not very far from where I grew up. And so I was familiar with all the tales. And when I wrote the book about that area, I talked about this werewolf, and it was known as Old Stinker because it had a putrid breath because it was eating carrion and dead flesh and
Ew.
things like that. So look, had
Ew.
appalling breath, and it was described as being walking on its hind legs and being very tall and having a powerful tail that could knock people over, and having these bright orangey red eyes. And I say it was historical because the area where this wolf was supposed to haunt was known in historical times to be plagued with wolves, particularly in winter. They'd come off the hills down into the farmland in the valley, and there was actually a hostel built there in Saxon times, 900 AD, 1000 AD, specifically so that people going through there would not be, and the quote is, so they wouldn't be eaten by wolves. So, they had this hostel there. So if you were traveling on the road, you'd go there at night and be safe. Um, and there were one of two tales of the werewolf cropping up again in later times, but then it faded out
Mm-hmm.
until it was the summer of 2015, and there were reports in a city called Hull, which is only about 30 miles in a straight line from where the old werewolf used to be. There were people saying that they'd heard that there was, saying they'd seen this huge dog-like, wolf-like creature attacking other animals and lurking around there, and they thought it was a werewolf. And a local journalist who knew I'd written the book asked me
Mm-hmm.
about it, and I rather jokingly said, "Looks like old Stinker's come back from the undead, and
Hmm.
he's changed his hunting grounds." Anyway, it became a bit of a internet 5-day wonder, and everybody got very carried away with it, and there were sightings all over the place. And eventually I got asked by a local newspaper, by a national newspaper, to go down there and on a werewolf hunt on the night of a full moon. And so I went. And as I sort of put in my biography, I didn't find anything, but maybe I was lucky and it didn't find me. But so I went on a midnight werewolf hunt, and I say it was very spooky, very interesting. The we had photographers there, so they set us up for a photo shoot in a graveyard, an abandoned graveyard at midnight, which was spooky in its own way. And the area where the wolf is said to haunt is along an old canal, which is, because it's had a lot of pollution in and still gets a bit of pollution in it, it tends to be warmer water. So on an evening, there's a mist around it. So it looks the part. It looks spooky when you're going down there. And so we went down there looking for the werewolf. Not quite sure what we'd do if we actually encountered a
Mm-hmm.
werewolf. Um, but I had a suspicion that if there was anything, it was going to be an actual big dog that was running loose. So I had a very heavy, stout stick with me that I thought with a sharp point on the other end. Um, and obviously, a point to bear in mind is that the um, rules on firearms in the possession of firearms in the UK are very, very strict. So going out with guns full of silver bullets just wasn't an option. You couldn't have done that even if you'd wanted to.
Well, think of
So
it that
anyway,
way. You know what? The stick had a nice point on the end. Now if you'd have run or do a vampire, you would have been fine too.
well, exactly.
See, you were
You know,
set.
it was a multi-purpose, multi-purpose demon slaying stick. Um, and so I went along there, and we walked the length of this long, spooky canal, and there were the hedges, and people had said something had been running down the banks of this canal. All the shrubbery was crushed, as if something big had been running around it, but it could be a mundane explanation for it. But then, almost as we were going to pack it in for the night, we spotted on the other side of a bank. Um, I had something looking at us. I had a strong torch with me, so I shone, and lo and behold, two large orange eyes were staring back at me.
Whoa.
Which, of course, orange eyes are what the creature's got. And you could tell by the distance the eyes were apart, it
Mm-hmm.
was big. It wasn't a fox or some sort of in a relatively small feral creature. And rather more spookily, whereas if you disturb a wild animal with a light or something, it will usually duck and run away from you.
Hmm.
This one was actually keeping pace with us on the other side of the bank and walking along with us. So as we moved to our left, it was moving to its right and sort of keeping a parallel to us. So I was a little bit worried, and we were quite concerned, but this encounter lasted for about 5 minutes and then it ducked down and disappeared. And I say, I think it was a large feral dog. There's
Yeah.
plenty of places around there where they could scavenge. And we've had a problem in the UK with people buying exotic pets, great big dogs like huskies and, fighting type dogs, which
Hmm.
they then discover cost a fortune to feed and keep and need a huge amount of exercise if they're not going to eat your house out of boredom. And so a lot of them get let loose and, dropped off somewhere, abandoned. And I suspect that was what I was encountering.
Hmm.
It was a creature out on the lam, if you like, um, and we'd spotted it. So I say it was intriguing because it wasn't a case of not seeing anything. Because I have to say,
Right.
I don't believe a sort of shape shifting werewolf is a real thing. Just the sheer physics involved in a
Hmm.
human turning into a wolf. They've got entirely different bone structures, leg structures, ribs, heart, jaws. Wolves have more teeth than us and things. And then going back again, you defy, something physical. I just don't believe could exist. But on the other hand, I was relieved that we did actually see something, and it was definitely a big, scary, furry animal of some sort. So I was happy with that.
Interesting. I was just thinking about some people like to get wolf hybrids too for pets,
Yeah,
and then they
yeah,
realize they can't handle them, and they're like 10 times bigger than a German Shepherd. So I mean, they're huge.
yeah. We don't have those over here. I think they wouldn't get in, be imported. But we
Right.
do have Malmoots, which are a type of husky.
Yeah.
And I did read somewhere that when you see a movie and somebody's been hunted down by wolves, it's usually Malmoots that are playing the wolves for the part of the movie. That can be trained, and so it could be something like a Malmoot or a husky, say both of which are big, big animals. Both can stand on their hind legs, and both are not pets you really want because they need a
Right.
huge amount of exercise and they eat a huge amount. And
I was thinking when you were talking about the bone structure, that movie, American Werewolf in London,
mhm,
the special
yeah,
effects for that, when the guy is turning into the wolf, they even make his bones crack. The sound of the bones
yes,
cracking as as
yes,
as, as he's changing. Yeah.
yes, yeah. Yeah, I was speaking to a person a few weeks ago who she's an anatomist. She teaches anatomy at a medical school in Edinburgh.
Mm-hmm.
And as part of the way of getting their students to be interested, they set them questions, and things they've looked at are, could werewolves actually exist? And, you know, she was explaining about the fact that the entire body cavity is different because a wolf runs on four legs, whereas we stand on two. So all our organs are in a different place. Plus, I say the extra teeth and the jaws and
Mm-hmm.
all the other things. Interestingly, she also sets students, discuss why zombies can't exist or how they could exist. The features of could you actually walk around if you were dead and so on. So I had a long conversation with her about werewolves, and I say she's very much of the impression that if a werewolf exists, the sort that we have in folklore, it must be some kind of elemental, spiritual, metaphysical thing rather than an actual creature, because they also have different DNA and um, different chromosomes, and it would be such a huge, complicated job to be
Hmm.
flicking backwards and forwards that would
That's true.
defy medical knowledge. But it could be, if it wasn't a creature of flesh and blood but something else, then obviously those rules don't apply. Anyway,
Why,
that was
why do
that
you
was my tale.
why do you think people like a good story like that?
Ooh, well, we like being scared, don't we? It's like ghost stories. I mean, I'm not a fan of visceral horror, like Friday the 13th and all
Hmm.
those um, movies like that. They're a bit too gory for me. I don't really like that side of stuff, but I do like a nice supernatural horror story, and with ghosts and ghoulies and things like that. And I think it's that sort of it must go back to when we were cavemen living in our caves, and nighttime was the frightening time because all we could do is hide in our caves and hope that the creatures of the night, wolves, bears, saber-toothed tigers, all the other predators that were around when early man was around, were prowling outside, hoping, please don't let them find our cave and come and eat us. And I don't know whether it's something in the back of the brain that just likes this sort of bit of a fright. And
Hmm.
because I mean, it's that thing with ghost stories as well, that um, you don't really enjoy them if you're reading them on a bright sunny day. They don't have the same effect. It's something to read at night, late at night, and it's dark and maybe the wind's blowing outside, and you're all inside and comfortable and
Hmm.
and safe, and these dangers are on the outside, and they're there. And I think it's something primitive. But I mean, people have been telling ghost stories, versions of vampire stories, versions of werewolf stories for thousands of years. It's not
Hmm.
it's not something that sprung up in the 1930s when the first movies, the first horror movies started coming out. You know, Bela Lugosi's
Right.
Frankenstein and Dracula and the Wolfman type thing. It's something ancient, and I think it's something in our psyche, likes the excitement and the thrill and the fact that it's not happening to us, it's happening to other people.
That's true. That's true. So the werewolves aren't the only weird creature running around the British Isles, is it?
No, well, I mean, obviously the most famous weird
Hmm.
creature is Nessie, the Loch Ness monster, which up in Scotland, which is um, depending on what you want, again, there's tales of it going back hundreds of years. I mean, most of the interest in it's been since the 1930s, when the famous photographs were taken, they called the surgeon's photographs. It was a surgeon who took them, although it's now suggested it was a hoax. But
Hmm.
there are tales going back to the Middle Ages, 1,000 years, of creatures living in not just Loch Ness, but some of the other lochs around there, um, and off the coast, of you know sea monsters of some form. And again, sea monsters are part of a tradition mariners have had, again, for hundreds and hundreds of years. This idea that there's big frightening creatures out there at sea, and you know we're discovering some things. I mean, like, for a long time, we all thought that tales of giant um, squid or octopuses and things like the kraken were fiction, but now scientists are fishing out, discovering these giant squid that live in the depths of the ocean and just how big they
Mm-hmm.
are. So, there's one creature that everybody thought was a fiction, and squids are never that big. Oh, yes, they are. What else is out there? There's a huge amount of ocean out there. Some of the locks in Scotland, and often they have links through to the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
They are very, very deep and very, very long. Loch Ness is a very long, deep body of water. So you're not going to be able to adequately um, survey the whole area to find out what's there, never mind looking at what is out there in the ocean. And, who knows what other things are out there. I mean, a classic example is the coelacanth, which is a sort of armored fish, which again was thought to, known from the fossil record to have been around millions of years ago, but assumed had become extinct.
Mm-hmm.
And people fished out real life examples of them, and they're still being caught, so they still exist. So that's a creature that apparently hid from people for the best part of several million years. Who else? What else is out there that we don't know about? You know, could some of the things, a plesiosaur is often mentioned as the most popular candidate
Yes.
for um, Loch Ness, or sea monsters. Um, but did they die out with the dinosaurs? Did they evolve? I mean, it's now accepted that birds evolved from the dinosaurs. Well, maybe other creatures evolved from the dinosaurs, didn't become extinct.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when if you accept the theory that dinosaurs became extinct when the asteroid came down off Mexico, was it 60, 70 million years ago, um, it wiped out everything on land, but there's areas of the oceans that would have been unaffected.
Mm-hmm.
Sharks have been around for millions of years. They survived that. Crocodiles have been around for millions of years. They survived those mass extinction events. What
Right.
else is out there?
Right.
The Pacific Ocean is enormous, as we know, and very, very deep. The Mariana Trench is what, miles deep. It's huge. It's what's down there.
Right.
So I think a lot of these things, there's stuff out there that we don't know about yet. um and one day we'll discover it, which is it's very exciting that some of these mysteries
I seem to
may be
remember a
solved.
photo, and I think it was National Geographic, many, many years ago. I don't know if it was taken by one of their photographers or somebody had given it to them, but it was actually a large fin they had gotten underwater in Loch Ness.
Hmm.
But they didn't
Yeah,
know what it belonged to. But it was a big fin, that they got this photo of.
yeah, yeah. um yeah, that there has been stuff that's not been adequately explained. um and it's a bit like um, the situation with UFOs.
Hmm.
The everybody says, oh, it's not UFOs at all. It's weather balloons or
Hmm.
something of that nature. Well, yes, most of those, or you're looking at a planet and seeing it at an angle. Well, yes, a lot can be explained by that. But there are still that small fraction that can't be explained.
Hmm.
And I think with things of sightings of cryptids, if we, call something like Loch Ness Monster a cryptid,
Hmm.
part of the cryptozoology, um, you can explain some of the sightings as being logs, as being ripples on the water, the wake from a boat that's out of moved on, but there's still stuff that doesn't quite fit, and that yeah, there are hoaxes out there, sadly, with a lot of these things, but there are also people who are totally honest and straightforward, and they aren't the sort to make up stories. They believe what they saw, and they saw something, and it was scary, and it was big, and it was in the water, but they don't know what it is. So you know, it's one of those mysteries.
See, I can understand it though. I mean, like with the locks, because we have Lake Tahoe over
Hmm.
here. Well, about 80 miles from where I'm at, and we have our own Loch Ness. We have Tessie, Tahoe
Hmm.
Tessie, and that's an extinct volcano. So that thing's got to be hecka deep. So there's
Mm.
got to be caves and everything down there where something could hide.
Mm.
So I can
Mm.
understand it. They even had the university come, for years were studying out there, and they never found anything. But I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of legends about it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, there's a whole lot of lake monsters and reportings across the whole of North America.
Hmm.
Um, Obviously, some of them are, you can say, well, it's just somebody jumping on the bandwagon. We've got to
Hmm.
have a lake monster as well as everybody else does. But you get reports of lake monsters in Africa. Well, again, some very large lakes there. You get them in um, what I suppose would be the eastern part of Russia, Siberia, big lakes out there. Um, Things have been reported over the years. Um, I, 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 I think there is stuff out there, um, but we just don't know what it is. And one of the reasons why it survives is because it's very good at hiding.
Yeah.
That's its survival strategy. It goes to ground, and I think a lot of these with the cryptids, um, there's an element of mysterious creatures in some of them, that aren't adequately explained. There's that annoying 10%, if you like, of accounts that you can't just simply say, oh well, you simply um, misread the situation. It was just some log, an old tree floating on the surface of the water with a branch sticking up,
Hmm.
and your imagination got the better of you. And it's the same with all of these mysterious paranormal type um, encounters. Uh, there's that element of doubt that we can't say, put hand on heart and say no, definitely doesn't exist. There's definitely nothing out there. We don't know.
Absolutely,
Um,
absolutely. And you
yeah.
could see it too. I mean, when everything was covered with water, you know, maybe when the asteroids hit or whatever, these creatures hid. They went down to their caves. They hid. The water receded. They came out. Now they're
Mm,
landlocked in water.
mm,
And
yeah.
then they're just there.
Yeah. Exactly. Um, Definitely. I mean, again, there's plenty of geological evidence you can find and maps of what the world looked like at different times through its history, and the changing nature of the water levels. I mean, the last ice age in Northern Europe and northern parts of North America was only 12,000 years ago. Um, Before that, it was completely different. I mean, where I live, the UK, was connected to Europe.
Hmm.
The landmass was totally different. Um, so you get a dramatic change like that with water levels swapping and changing. Um, it completely transforms it, and the species, certain creatures are marooned outside their area, and some of them survive and evolve and move on, and I, it's not at all unreasonable that some strange creatures that you think shouldn't exist actually do exist, because they've managed to survive.
Since Halloween's coming, or
Mm-hmm.
at least here anyway, what are some of the more scarier creatures or stories out of the UK?
Well, we don't have that many scary creatures, I suppose.
Okay.
I mean, there's an awful lot of tales of um, black dogs and black cats that are
Hmm.
supposedly too big to be natural species, but with some of those, a quite likely explanation is they are exotic pets that have escaped or been
Right.
dropped off, and there's enough of them that they've formed a viable population and can survive. Um, so we don't have much of a tradition of scary animals. I suppose it's really ghosts that we like, and the place is thick in them. There's ghosts everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and I suppose that's the scary thing. Though obviously Halloween has. I mean, we were quite late in the UK getting into Halloween as a
Hmm.
as a um, a holiday. The big holiday for us always used to be November the 5th, bonfire night, and we'd have everybody had bonfires and let off fireworks, and it's all to do with Guy Fawkes, who was a man who tried to blow up the Houses of Parliament with a giant bomb in the early 17th century, but was captured, and it became almost a state-sponsored celebration that you know we survived against anarchy and terrible conspirators, and that was the big festival from 19th century through to middle of the 20th century, and then say Halloween has started to take over. We used to have a thing called Mischief Night, which
Hmm.
wasn't Halloween, it was actually the day before Bonfire Night, where we would go out and indulge in what as kids we thought was fun, but as adults I can see would be minor acts of vandalism and public nuisance. Chaining people's gates together. A favourite one when I was at my school was ordering taxis for unpopular teachers, and sometimes ordering them every quarter of an hour all night to turn up there, and just generally, pranks of that nature.
Hmm.
And then that really faded away, and Halloween took over as it. And obviously, the key thing about Halloween is the trick or treating and the whole dressing up thing. And obviously, again, that's changed. Used to be largely ghosts or witches that we dress up, but now again, we very much follow the fashion for fancy dress costumes and hiring spectacular costumes or making them based on TV superheroes or whoever. So it has evolved. That um, say where I am actually is a rural area, and there's nothing out here, so we don't get any trick or treating, because uh, we live on a dark, unlit, spooky road, with the rumor that just about 200 yards up the road from us is a place called Misery Corner that's said to be haunted by a woman who um, drowned herself or hanged herself there about 150 years ago. So most of the locals won't go there after dark anyway.
That's funny. Um, I was just thinking about the Tower of London and the
Mhm.
legends that are there
Yeah.
with Anne Boleyn, and stuff. Um, do you think they're there? I mean, the ghosts that are there are probably there because of what went on. Being beheaded and everything there. Um, how frequent is she seen, or is she not seen now?
She's not seen now, but I mean, Anne Boleyn is unusual because she's probably the most frequently sighted ghost in the country. Um, she haunts the Tower of London. Um, that really got a boost in the 1930s when there was a song with her head tucked underneath her arm. She walks the bloody tower, the bloody tower being one of the prison
Mm-hmm.
towers in the Tower of London. And so that tended to boost it. But she haunts there. She haunts a house down in Kent where she grew up. She haunts a house in Norfolk where I am, where she grew up. Um, on the eve of her execution, day of her execution, her ghost is said to drive up in a carriage with her sitting inside, with her head holding her head in her hands, um, to you know returning home, and
Mm-hmm.
her father, who was very unpopular. He didn't get executed, but he gets a bad reputation because he basically didn't raise a finger to help either
Mm-hmm.
Anne or her brother. He'd rather stay in with the king rather than stick with his children. And he is said in this part of the world that on the eve of his death, he has to ride in a coach and horses and cross 12 bridges in Norfolk between the hours of midnight and dawn. And it's physically impossible, certainly by horse and cart, to cross all those bridges within that time. And he's doomed to do that until he can um, cross the bridges. And until then, he's stuck on earth or in hell, and he'll never go to heaven. So we've got a good strong Anne Boleyn haunting.
Mm-hmm.
But going back to your earlier point about the Tower of London, it was a centre of government from the time uh, of the well, even before the Normans. They built the current White Tower building, but there was a fort there for 100 years or so before. And it was the center of government, it was the fort, it was the main prison. Important state prisoners were kept there, even during the Second World War.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Suspected spies were kept in the Tower of London, um, and detained there. And so there's been a lot of people who've been there, and a lot of people who've been executed there, and a lot of people who also were tortured before they were executed there. So, if you go for that idea that um, a lot of ghosts are kind of residual um, influence, almost ingrained in the stonework where
Mm-hmm.
it was so traumatic, well, that place is you know, dripping in blood. And it's not surprising that there are so many tales of ghosts from there. I was thinking back. I think one of the last um, reported sightings of Anne Boleyn was during the 1940s, during the Second World War again, and a soldier apparently deserted his post because the ghost came towards him.
Well, what do you think is one of the most haunted places in the UK?
Ooh, well, the single most must, as I've said, would be the tower.
Right.
Um, there's a small village. I'll have to look its name up. In Kent, which is said to have more ghosts than anywhere else. But I think that is really its sort of modern folklore,
Mm-hmm.
and it's taken off and is now very popular with ghost hunters and ghost walks, to the point that people are the locals are complaining that there's so many people marching around their village looking for ghosts and things. But it's hard to say whether or not they're real ghosts, or whether it's as a result of being in books and in
Right.
folklore and on television and carried on.
Right.
Um, Borley Rectory, which is now burned down, that had a reputation for being haunted, and that was the subject of a lot of ghost hunts in the um, first half of the 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, there were supposedly ghosts of walled up nuns, other people who died there. Definitely had some strange, mysterious things going on there. And but interestingly, it seemed to attract a lot of visitors who themselves possibly weren't quite as clear thinking as they should be, and had their own theories and ideas they wanted to push. And that burned down again
Mm-hmm.
in somewhat mysterious circumstances, though could well have been quite simply somebody doing it for the insurance, because the house had such a bad reputation, no one would rent it, and so the easiest way to get rid of it was to burn it down and start from scratch. But Borley Rectory, and Harry Price, who was famous ghost hunter of the
Mm-hmm.
1930s, 1940s, 1950s in England, he did a lot of work investigating it. That's probably the most, after the tower, is probably the best known one. But
What?
again, it's a bit historical because it's now burned down, and there's been no activity there now for
Right. Right.
many years, because it's, the site's completely transformed and derelict.
Have you heard of the stories of 5E Castle?
5e, um, can't place it off the top of my head. Is that in Scotland?
Yeah, it's in Scotland. That's the
No,
one that's supposed to have the elemental down in the um like basement area.
not familiar with that one.
Okay, that's cool. That's
Um,
cool.
there's Glamis Castle,
Uh huh.
which the current Queen of England's mother grew up in. Her family owned it, and that's got a very bad reputation. Um, it's said to be some parts of multiple ghosts, including um, people who were murdered there and betrayed there, and it's got this quite elaborate story that one of the family was born deformed, but horrendously deformed, so was kept in a locked room that no one other than the head of the family and the eldest son knew, and was kept there and lived for a long time. And it was supposedly when the heir, if you like, the son of the laird of the castle, um,
Hmm.
came of age, he'd be taken down to this room and said, you know, that person there, because apparently it lived a very long time, that is the true laird of um, lord, if you like, of
Mm-hmm.
Glamis Castle. Just remember that. And there was an incident where there was a big party there, and people decided they would try and find where this room was, and so they all agreed to hang a handkerchief, go into all the rooms and hang a handkerchief or a scarf out of each window. And if they could find a window where there wasn't a scarf hanging from, then that would be the missing room, and then they could pin down where it was.
Okay.
And apparently they were doing that, and then the lord of, or Scottish call it a laird, discovered what they were doing and made them stop. And so that sort of rather fueled the story that there was something terrible lurking there.
All it
There's
takes is one person to tell a story, and then another person takes that story,
yeah,
embellishes it, and it just goes on and on and on and on to where it gets to where we're at now, listening to
mm,
these stories and what and they're wonderful stories, but you wonder whether how much is truth and how much is legend.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, with something like that,
Mm-hmm.
it's entirely possible that one of the family was born with
Yes.
horrendous defects of some sort, which, um, you know, 100, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, people would not have understood. They would have seen it as some kind of curse or, something of that nature. And they would have kept it secret.
Mm-hmm.
And it just sort of builds up from there. Um, that I mean, where we are
Okay, he's frozen, and wow. Okay, well, we'll see if he gets back on because he did freeze up. Let's see if I can get him out. I'm going to bring him back in. So just hang in there, guys. I'm going to remove him and bring him back in. Okay. Nope, he froze up on us. That's not good. Why is it when people freeze on these things, they always freeze with their mouth open? All right, let me email him real fast to let him know that he froze. Okay, let's see. He probably knows it. Let me do this. It's been fascinating talking with him. I'm just sitting here typing in some email here. You froze up, buddy. Okay. See, we haven't had that happen in a while, have we? Maybe something didn't like us talking about them. Okay, he's back.
yes,
Maybe something didn't like us talking about them or something.
well, exactly. But I was saying, near this part of the world and in other coastal areas, there used to be smuggling in the 18th century, and the smugglers were known to spread tales of ghosts and um, boogeymen, things that you wouldn't want to see, because they'd spread a tale and say, that wood over there, that's haunted by somebody or other.
Mm-hmm.
And so the locals would steer clear of it. So it'd be a nice, useful way for the smugglers to bring their contraband in and go through that wood and keep on with their activities without anybody interfering with them. So I say that people have reasons for starting rumors like that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
we had a very gory phase in English history during the 18th century and the first part of the 19th century, where um, it was called the Bloody Code because there were so many crimes that you could be executed for. And one of the punishments for murder was that once you'd been hanged, you'd be then hanged in chains, which is basically an iron cage. So
Mm-hmm.
your dead body would be hung up on a gibbet at the scene of the murder, as opposed to where you were executed, because they'd be executed in outside a court or wherever the prison was. And these gibbets with dead people in, some of them were there 20, 30, 40 plus years, and creaking in the wind, and distinctly very spooky. So you'd avoid that. And I say, I do know that one area around here where there was such a gibbet, the smugglers used it as one of their lairs, because they knew nobody would be going around there. And
Mm-hmm.
if they did, they'd just go into the local pub and tell people, "Oh, saw the ghost of old Toby. He's walking again," and you'd keep people away.
You guys, the British people love their ghosts.
Mm, we do, we do. It's and I don't know whether it's like that in the United States, but certainly um, a ghost tale at Christmas. I mean, Charles Dickens has a lot for that
Mm-hmm.
with Christmas Carol and some of his other stories, ghost stories he wrote around the Christmas season. And that very much sort of has been a tradition for now, well, since mid-Victorian times. So,
Mm-hmm.
150 plus years, that Christmas is a time for ghost stories, and you know, gathering round a fire and telling tales and cracking nuts, cooking nuts on the open fire, and then telling stories. And certainly, I grew up in a household where we used to do that over Christmas, and it was probably what got me so fascinated with the weird and things in the first place. But it was a tradition, and the Christmas ghost story. So it's kept along, and it's still part of our, I suppose, still part of our culture.
Absolutely. Speaking of culture, how about leprechauns? Let's talk about those. We didn't talk about those last time.
Hmm. Well, I mean, leprechauns are Irish as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to British,
Right.
um, and they are, again, there's this whole culture of, we know about fairies and elves, but there's all these other little creatures, elementals, goblins, hobgoblins, and things that are uh, dwarves, like Snow White and the Seven Dwarves,
Mm-hmm.
gnomes and things, all vaguely human but smaller. And I'm not sure where the actual leprechaun comes from, but the Irish do have a big tradition uh, for fairy folk, and they believe that the people who used to occupy Ireland before humans came along were these kind of supernatural beings. The um, Anybody Irish will curse me for it, but it's something like the Tiana Dan or something like that, the name
Right.
of them. But there were um, supernatural beings who lived there, and that they still exist there in out of sight now. Like a lot of the tales, they avoid humans now, and urbanization. But I mean, the leprechaun's an intriguing little character, and it's another of those where you never encounter female ones. They're always men. um you sort of wonder quite how they manage to survive or go on. But
Mm-hmm.
they're said to be if you can grab hold of one, um, they will show you where their gold is hidden. But again, like a lot of legends about people like that, there's always a trick. And if you ask them a question or you ask for a wish, a bit like with genies, you've got to be very careful what you wish for, because they will do it the wrong way if they can, or they'll do it in a mischievous way.
Mm-hmm.
And they're also, um, yeah, the legend is that they actually are the cobblers for fairies, and that the fairies who do the fairy dancing and dance around their mushrooms and their um, fairy circle, sort of a uh, they dance all night, that they wear their shoes out and wear holes in their shoes, so they take them to leprechauns, who are some kind of fairy folk. But I say, they're all said to have a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but they will trick you if you catch them or try and tell you where it is. I mean, the whole, my gold's buried at the pot at the end of the rainbow is the whole thing, that if you try and follow a rainbow, it's always moving until it fades away. You never actually get to the bottom of it. So they're an intriguing one. Like a lot of these, the reputation is that they aren't necessarily hostile to humans,
Mm-hmm.
but and will tolerate us, but they like having fun with us. And I suppose, if you accept that the likes of fairies and elves once were more common, um, I suppose it's they resent the fact that they've been driven away by humans who build houses and roads everywhere and
Mm-hmm.
change the landscape and change their settled worlds. But I say, yeah, so funnily enough, we don't have any leprechauns in England. It is purely an Irish
See, it's a big
folklore.
deal over here. St. Patrick's Day comes, and that's all we see over here is leprechauns plastered everywhere.
Mm,
And I
mm,
remember in elementary school, the teacher would tell the story of Duffy O'Reilly, and he'd be running around the school, and if you found him, you got a big packet of chocolate and all this, and it's just they've turned it into a big deal here.
mm. Well, I mean, North America does have, the US does have a huge Irish population. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
population of Ireland proper is very small, um, and it's got a huge expatriate population who largely expatriate because they didn't like the English when Ireland was a British colony, and so they moved away and they took their traditions and their folklore with them. And the wearing of the green of and the leprechaun in the green, that's actually quite a recent development and
Mm-hmm.
reflects Irish nationalism, when green became the um, the colour of Irish nationalists, people wanting to get the English out. Before that, they wore entirely different clothes, but that that followed on.
Let's talk about Christmas. Let's talk about Father Christmas versus what the United States thinks of Santa Claus. What
Mm,
is Father Christmas over the pond?
mm. Um, Father Christmas over the pond, yeah. Santa Claus, I mean, we call them Father Christmas, Santa Claus, and Saint Nicholas, but they're actually three different
Okay.
um, three different traditions. Saint Nicholas is very much more a European character, and following the largely Catholic countries, and they all have the same traits. They all wear red gowns with white trimmings on them.
Mm-hmm.
Saint Nicholas also is a bishop and has a bishop's hat, and he um, he actually turns up in some parts of Europe on the 6th of December, which is St. Nicholas's Day, I think, Feast of St. Nicholas, um, and gives the presents out there. But again, Christmas Day is now such a bit like Halloween. It's such an international thing that people still celebrate the 25th. Um, we tend to go for Father Christmas, and Father Christmas is more like, again, going back to Dickens with his Christmas Carol. And the first ghost that comes along is the ghost of Christmas Past, I think. Or the second ghost that comes along is the ghost of Christmas Past,
Mm-hmm.
who is the big jovial fellow who looks like a druid in a big dressing gown and is all for having parties and remembering the good old days when everything was jolly. And the Father Christmas we have really follows more of that tradition. That is a big jolly fellow, um, with this big long red gown, the huge big long white beard, and he's more about the spirit of Christmas. Um, I suppose that's the difference. Whereas Santa Claus is a little bit smaller, more elfy. The Father Christmas um, of tradition doesn't have all the elves and helpers, but
Mm-hmm.
because we live in a multicultural world, all the different influences come to play. So um, we might call him Father Christmas, but he has his elves, and he has his reindeer, and he has Rudolph, and he has Donner and Blitzen and all the other ones. So it's a bit of a hybrid now, where we have a bit of all of them. The thing we don't have in England, and I don't think you have it over there, that it's big in Europe, is the fact that um, Saint Nicholas also has a helper who is his dark side, and very much um, Saint Nicholas or Santa Claus gives presents to all the children who've been good,
Mm-hmm.
but he has a an imp with him, or a demon, um, various different names um, for him. I'm just trying to remember one. Scandinavia have a very, very scary version of it with huge horns and fangs and things. Um, and his role is to punish the naughty children, and either by giving them horrible presents, or generally being horrible to them. And in some versions, he drags them off, puts them in a basket, and takes them home and eats them. So
Whoa.
it, there's different traditions to do with it, and
That'll keep
say,
him in line.
yeah, yeah. But it's one that we don't really have. That the I oh, just scratching my brain to try and remind me what the name of the creature is.
I know who you're talking. I know who you're talking about. I can't remember either off the top of my head.
Yeah. Um,
I know there's an animatronic people can buy where he's holding up two children by their feet.
that's the one. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I forget
Um,
who it is.
yeah. The brain's gone terrible. I can't remember off
They
the.
even have parades featuring that thing.
Yeah,
It's really scary.
yeah, yeah. you can find on YouTube some old news stories from the 1930s and things. And there's one of them where St. Nicholas comes to the village and everybody greets him. And then he brings out this vampire-like demon with him who sort of chases all the naughty children. And you can tell the kids are actually terrified by this creature. But, oh, what was his name? What was his
Yeah, I
name?
can't think of it. That's funny. What are the traditions? I
Yeah.
mean, what's the difference? I mean, I know United States kids will, Christmas Eve. There's always a Christmas Eve meal here. Sometimes they'll like recite the night before Christmas. Kids put out reindeer. They put out carrots or veggies for the reindeer and cookies. Is there a difference in what the kids do the night before in the UK?
No, we still do broadly the same.
Mm-hmm.
Um, hang up a stocking or a sack of
Sure.
something for the presents, either on the mantelpiece or at the bottom of your bed. Um, and we uh, leave out a drink and some food for Santa Claus. We used to, yeah, some people left out carrots as well for the reindeer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but when I grew up, we used to leave a mince pie, and that's sort of a sweet currants and raisins type little pie. Um, leave a couple of mince pies for Santa Claus at the bottom of the fireplace, and a glass of sherry, which we know a glass of alcoholic drink. So that was the tradition we had, that we did it. And I do remember thinking that he's going to be drunk in charge of a sleigh, the amount of, if he goes around every house and has that. But that was
But that's the rosy cheeks.
that's the rosy cheeks.
That's the
Yes,
rosy
yeah,
cheeks. Yeah.
yeah. But that was the tradition on Christmas Eve, and obviously that you had to be in bed and asleep, otherwise he wouldn't come. Um, and I remember sort of lying in bed, hearing footsteps and things, and part of the brain was saying it's just your parents going about, but
Mm-hmm.
other part said, "What if it's Santa Claus?" So you sort of hide under the bedding and your eyes tightly shut. So if you can't see him, he can't see you, and you're not going to be deprived of your presence.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It is always wonderful to have you on. There's just so much to talk about with you. So much.
Well, thank you. That was brilliant. I love talking to you, and I say, just racking my head now to try and remember the name of those
That thing.
the things. Yes,
The thing.
yeah. That's actually spreading, and coming over from Europe, we're getting more of it. And I think you, as you mentioned, you get it in.
Well, of
parts
course, the
Britain.
people in the U.S. like it because it's evil. I mean, I'll tell you that right now. That to them, that's awesome. That's how we
Yeah,
are over here.
yeah. Well, it's
Yeah,
another excuse for fancy dress and dressing up, so it's fun.
yeah, absolutely. Anyway, thank you again. I'd love to have you on again at some point down the line
Yep, yep,
because it's so
definitely.
fun to talk to you and talk to you about different legends and stuff. I just love it. It's so fun.
No, it's my
I,
pleasure.
I adore you.
Thank you.
But thank you so much.
Okay, then. Thank you. Take care
You
of
have a good one,
yourselves until
sir.
the next time.
Okay,
Okay,
till the
then.
next time. All right,
Yep.
bye bye.
Bye now.
Okay. It is so fun to have him on, and again, we're going to get him back on again because man, there's so many legends to talk about, and there's so much I want to touch on, and I just love talking to him. Anyway, thanks for coming, you guys. Today was an early show because he is in the UK. Tomorrow we're back on our usual time at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time, and we got an interesting show. DP Greycastle is going to be on, and he has done studies, kind of like, I don't want to say astrology, but it's kind of like a numbers astrology thing, where he goes through the letters of your name and he associates your letters with different colors. And once he does that, he's able to to put it together with what goes on in your life and how your life's going to go, your future, your current life, whatever. But that's what he does, and it's very interesting. He did mine, and it was spot on. So I thought that was really fascinating. So I wanted to get him on, and so he'll be on tomorrow at 6:30. It's going to be a phone-in interview, just to let you know. But he's going to be on, and he said he would do numbers for people I know. So maybe one of my loyal listeners who comes on can get their numbers done. So we're going to see if we can do that, to get their numbers done live. And we'll see what we can do about that. But anyway, that's what's going to happen tomorrow. And so I will see you guys at 6:30. And I forgot to have our gentleman give his contact information. But you can go ahead and Google him, Charles Christian, author Charles Christian, and you'll find all his books and everything. Because I forgot to do his contact. I'm such a ditz sometimes. But anyway, thank you guys for coming, and I will see you guys tomorrow. And yeah, it was kind of fun talking with Charles. I'm trying to find my little, there it is. All right, guys, I'll see you tomorrow.